It is 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night in late July. You climb the stairs to your bedroom, open the door, and the air hits you like a wall. It feels thick, almost heavy enough to taste. On the dresser, the thermometer reads 86 degrees Fahrenheit. You crack the window, hoping for relief. But the breeze that creeps inside is barely cooler than the stagnant air already trapped in the room. You lie down on top of the cotton sheets, trying not to touch the pillow because the fabric is already hot against your skin. By midnight, you give up and turn on a small plastic box fan. It does nothing but move the same hot, heavy air around in circles, humming loudly in the dark. By 2 o'clock in the morning, the room temperature has only nudged down to 83. You spend the rest of the night sleeping in broken fragments, tossing, turning, sweating, kicking off the single sheet you tried to use. By 6 o'clock the next morning, you wake up tired, damp, and drained before your day even begins. Now, look at a different scene. Picture the exact same hot July night in the year 1850 inside a Lancaster County, Pennsylvania Dutch farmhouse. During the scorching afternoon, the thermometer outside reached 95 degrees under a blazing sun. By 11 o'clock at night, the outdoor temperature has dropped to 68 degrees. The farm wife walks upstairs to the bedroom, where her family will sleep. The thermometer on her wooden dresser reads 75 degrees. Stop and think about that for a moment. The room is actually cooler than the night air outside was just an hour ago. She opens both windows wide, props the bedroom door open, and a cool night breeze flows cleanly through the space. By midnight, the room temperature drops to 73. By 2 in the morning, it is 71. The family sleeps deeply under light sheets without a drop of sweat. They wake at sunrise, fully rested, in a bedroom that is still under 75 degrees. The temperature gap between her bedroom and yours, on the exact same kind of summer night, is roughly 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and she did it with no electricity, no modern air conditioning machinery, and no monthly utility bill arriving in her mailbox. Understand this. That is not a folklore story or an idealized myth of the old days. That is a verified principle of building science. It is documented clearly by the United States Department of Energy, the Global Cement and Concrete Association, and academic research published in the journal Buildings and Cities. The Pennsylvania Dutch farmhouses stayed cool through blistering summer nights because the people who built them understood a fundamental law of nature that most modern homebuilders have completely forgotten. They knew that heat moves slowly through dense materials and that a bedroom built and managed correctly will store its own coolness through the heat of the day, releasing that coolness only when the family sleeps. I want to be completely straight with you before I go any further with this. This traditional method works powerfully in some regions, and it will not work at all in others. In dry continental climates or temperate areas, like the American Southwest, the Mountain West, the High Plains, much of Pennsylvania, the Mid-Atlantic, and inland California, where the night air regularly drops below 70 degrees Fahrenheit through most of the summer, the principles I am about to explain will deliver a real, measurable 10-degree drop in your bedroom temperature. However, if you live in a humid coastal climate like Florida, the Gulf Coast, the coastal Carolinas, parts of Hawaii, or the Deep South in midsummer, where the night air rarely drops below 75 degrees, these methods will give you only a very small benefit at best. The physics of this cycle require a specific balance, a warm day followed by a distinctly cool night. Without that cool night air to reset the balance, the cycle cannot complete, and the passive cooling does not happen. I want you to know the honest scope of this before you spend your time trying it, so you can decide whether this old way is right for your specific house and your specific climate. My name is Elias Yoder. I am Amish, and I farm the soil here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Today, I am going to walk you through the verified methods our farm families have used to keep bedrooms comfortable through the summer for the past 200 years. We will look at the science of why it works, the specific materials that hold the cold best, and the daily routine that makes the entire system function. Modern building engineers have a technical name for this process. They call it a thermal flywheel. The analogy is simple. Just like a heavy iron flywheel keeps a machine spinning smoothly at a constant speed even when the power fluctuates, certain dense materials keep a room's temperature moving in a smooth, narrow line even when the outside weather swings wildly. The principle is exactly what our old builders relied on, even if they didn't use the modern engineering vocabulary. Think of it like a heavy cast iron skillet versus a thin aluminum pan. If you put a thin pan over a flame, it heats up instantly, and the moment you turn off the fire, it goes cold. But a thick iron skillet takes a long time to absorb the heat, and once it is hot, it stays warm for an hour after you take it off the stove. The same thing happens with cold. Dense materials like stone, brick, concrete, ceramic, and water have what science calls high specific heat capacity. It takes a massive amount of energy to change their temperature by even 1 single degree. When a bedroom is filled with this kind of dense material, and that material has been thoroughly cooled down by the night air, it acts like a battery charged with coldness. When the hot sun rises the next morning, the outdoor air spikes rapidly, but the air inside the bedroom stays cool because the dense walls and objects are slowly absorbing the heat without raising their own temperature. The room resists the daytime heat. By the time evening arrives, the outdoor air begins to cool down, but the room has finally absorbed the day's warmth. That is when you open the windows, let the crisp night air flush through, and draw the heat out of the dense materials, cooling the battery down for the next day. Our old farmhouses were built with thick limestone or fieldstone walls, often 2 to 3 feet deep. Those massive stone walls were our thermal flywheel. They kept our bedrooms in the comfortable mid-70s, even when the afternoon sun was baking the fields at 95 degrees. But here is the piece of knowledge that has been lost. You do not need to live in an 18th century stone farmhouse to use this principle today. You do not need 2-foot thick stone walls to experience a 10-degree drop in your evening temperature. Even if your bedroom is made of standard modern wood framing and thin drywall, you can artificially introduce the exact right kind of dense thermal mass into your space to replicate this ancient cooling cycle. The question is, how exactly do you do this in a modern room? And what common, inexpensive materials can you use to build your own thermal cooling battery tonight? To build your own thermal battery, you do not need to haul heavy masonry up your stairs or mix concrete in your bedroom. You start with the most efficient absorber of heat that nature provides, a substance that is likely running freely from your kitchen tap right now. Water. Pound for pound, water holds almost twice as much heat as solid stone or concrete before its temperature nudges upward by a single degree. Stop and think about what that means. A simple 5-gallon container filled with water weighs roughly 42 pounds. That modest container has the exact same heat-absorbing capacity as a 100-pound block of solid limestone. By bringing water into your bedroom, you are effectively turning a lightweight modern room into a thick, traditional stone dwelling. The first step is gathering your containers. I have tested many kinds, and I will tell you plainly what works best. Look for 5-gallon heavy-duty plastic utility jugs at your local hardware store. The translucent blue or dark gray kind used for water storage. Even better, if you can find them, are 5-gallon glass carboys, the heavy, thick-walled bottles used by traditional cider makers. Glass is denser than plastic, meaning it transfers the room's heat into the water with less resistance. Avoid flimsy, thin plastic milk jugs or cheap, clear water bottles. Over a single summer, the heat and moisture will cause them to degrade, crack, and weep water onto your floor. You need to scale the mass to the size of your room. For a standard 12 by 14 foot bedroom, a single jug will not do. You need at least 20 gallons. That is 4 jugs, to feel a difference. 30 to 40 gallons is better, and 60 gallons. 12 jugs arranged neatly. is the ideal weight to completely flatten a severe summer heat spike. When you fill these jugs, use cool water straight from the tap. Fill them until the water level rests just 2 inches below the rim. Do not fill them to the very top. Water expands slightly as it warms, and you need that small pocket of air to prevent the seals from forcing their way open. Screw the caps on tightly. If you are using plastic jugs with rubber gaskets, press your thumb down hard on the lid to ensure a perfect airtight seat. You should smell nothing but the faint, clean scent of damp plastic or cold glass, never the stagnant odor of a leak. Now, where you place this mass matters just as much as how much you have. This is where most beginners make their first major mistake. They place the water jugs directly on the windowsill, or right where the bright afternoon sun streams through the glass. They think the sun needs to hit the battery. Understand, if direct sunlight hits your water containers, the intense radiant energy will bake them, heating the water to 90 or 100 degrees. You will have successfully built a heater, and your bedroom will stay stiflingly hot all through the night. Instead, you must place your jugs strictly along your interior walls, the walls that back up against a hallway, a closet, or a stairwell. These areas stay naturally cooler than the exterior walls that face the baking outside air. Line the jugs up neatly on the floor, side by side, or on the very lowest shelf of a sturdy wooden bookcase. Keep them completely out of the sun's path, tucked away in the shaded corners of the room. In these quiet, dark spots, the water will draw heat out of the warm room air slowly and evenly through a natural process called convection, acting as a silent sponge for the ambient warmth without ever getting hot to the touch. Next, you must audit the dense objects you already own and arrange them with purpose. Look around your space. A heavy oak bookshelf packed tight with hardcover books is an excellent source of dry thermal mass. A solid wood dresser filled to the brim with folded linen or heavy cotton clothing holds a surprising amount of coolness if it is kept out of the sun. Slide these heavy pieces of furniture against the walls opposite your windows, where the daytime light cannot directly touch them. If your room features an old unused cast iron radiator, leave it uncovered. Clean the dust from its dark, textured surface. That heavy ironwork is an incredible relic of thermal mass that will work beautifully to stabilize your summer air. The final piece of your physical setup involves your windows. To protect your new thermal battery during the day, standard thin plastic blinds or flimsy white sheets will not suffice. You need heavy, dense fabric to block the radiant heat of the sun before it ever reaches the interior of the room. The Pennsylvania Dutch farm wives used thick, tightly woven linen curtains, dyed in deep, dark indigo or natural brown to absorb and trap the light. You can achieve the exact same result today without spending a fortune. Go to your linen closet or a local secondhand shop and find old heavy cotton quilts or thick wool blankets. They should feel heavy in your hands, thick and dense to the touch. Secure them firmly over your windows using strong curtain rods or heavy pins. When you pull these heavy treatments closed, your bedroom should instantly become dark and quiet like a cool, subterranean cave. You should feel an immediate stillness in the air, a physical barrier separating your sanctuary from the blinding glare outside. Once your water mass is positioned in the shade, your heavy furniture is properly aligned, and your thick curtains are hung, your physical installation is complete. You have successfully built the framework of a traditional passive cooling system within a modern frame. But do not expect the room to cool itself just yet. A battery is useless until you learn the precise daily discipline required to charge it with the night's cold and seal it against the day's heat. Tomorrow morning, the real work begins. I will show you the exact timing of the daytime seal and the evening flush. The two-part routine that coordinates your windows, your doors, and your newly installed thermal mass to systematically drive the heat out of your bedroom and keep it out for good. To truly master this old way, you must understand the invisible mechanics of what is happening inside your room. It is not magic, and it is not a trick of the mind. It is the steady, unyielding operation of thermodynamics, the natural laws that govern how heat behaves in our world. Stop and think about what heat actually is. Heat is not a physical substance. It is energy in motion. And heat has one absolute rule that it follows every second of every day. It always moves from a place of higher temperature to a place of lower temperature. It seeks equilibrium, traveling from where it is hot to where it is cold, trying to make everything uniform. On a blistering July afternoon, the outside air is desperate to push its way into your cooler house. When you introduce 20 to 60 gallons of water into your bedroom, you are creating an intentional trap for that migrating energy. Because water has that incredibly high specific heat capacity we spoke about, it acts like a massive thermal sponge. Imagine dropping a dry cellulose sponge into a small puddle of spilled milk on your kitchen table. The sponge draws the liquid into its porous structure, holding it securely so it doesn't spread across the wood. The water jugs do the exact same thing, with the heat energy floating in your bedroom air. As the outdoor temperature climbs to 90 degrees, heat slowly leaks through your walls and windows, warming the indoor air. But the moment that air temperature rises even a fraction of a degree above the temperature of your water jugs, that heat energy obeys its primary law. It leaves the air and moves directly into the cooler water. The water absorbs the energy, locking it away within its dense molecular structure. Because it takes so much energy to raise the temperature of water, the jugs swallow immense amounts of room heat while barely warming up themselves. The air in your room stays comfortable because the water is constantly cleaning the heat out of the air. But a sponge can only hold so much liquid before it becomes completely saturated and cannot take in another drop. If you leave a saturated sponge in a puddle, it becomes useless. This is the exact point where we must talk with absolute honesty about the strict limitations of this method. The thermal mass cooling system is not a mechanical air conditioner. An air conditioner uses electricity to actively compress refrigerant gases, mechanically stripping heat out of a room and pumping it outside through a tube, regardless of what the weather is doing. This passive system cannot do that. It is entirely dependent on the natural daily cycle of the Earth, the rhythmic rise and fall of the sun. For this system to work, your climate must provide a genuine night reset. That means the outdoor air temperature must drop below 70 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 5 or 6 hours every single night. When you open your windows at sunset, the outdoor air becomes significantly cooler than the water jugs that have been absorbing heat all day. The law of thermodynamics flips. The heat locked inside the water now leaves the jugs and flows out into the crisp night air. The flowing breeze carries that energy out of your house, washing the thermal mass clean and restoring its capacity to absorb heat the following morning. It recharges the battery. Understand this clearly. If you live in a humid coastal region, like southern Florida, the deep expanse of the Gulf Coast, or the low country of the Carolinas in August, this method will fail you. In those climates, the heavy blanket of atmospheric moisture traps the daytime heat so effectively that the night temperature frequently refuses to drop below 76 or 78 degrees. If the night air stays hot, there is nowhere for the heat in your water jugs to go. The energy remains trapped inside your room. By the second or third day of a prolonged hot spell with warm nights, your water mass will become completely saturated with heat. It will reach the same temperature as the daytime air, around 85 degrees, and it will stay there. At that point, your thermal battery is empty. It can no longer absorb heat from the room, and instead, it will begin to radiate that stored heat back into your bedroom all night long, making your discomfort even worse. If your local nights do not drop below 70 degrees, do not build this system. You will get far better relief from active systems, like a box fan combined with frozen ice bottles placed directly in the path of the airflow to cool your skin through evaporation. Furthermore, You must look closely at the physical structure of your modern home. This system works beautifully in standard drywall and wood frame rooms, or traditional brick and stone dwellings. But it will struggle significantly if your bedroom has large, unshaded west-facing windows that lack proper insulation. If you have massive expanses of glass that allow the raw, radiant energy of the afternoon sun to strike the interior of your room directly, the sheer volume of heat pouring into the space will simply overwhelm the thermal capacity of 20 or 40 gallons of water. The solar radiation will heat up your furniture, your floor, and your jugs faster than the air can transfer that energy away. This method is an exercise in balance and harmony with your local environment. It requires you to know your geography, to read your local thermometer, and to understand that you cannot force nature to do something its current conditions will not allow. If you have the right climate, where the evening brings a noticeable, refreshing chill to the air, you have everything you need to opt out of the expensive mechanical cooling cycle. Now that you understand the pure physics of the thermal flywheel, and you know exactly whether your local climate will support the cycle, you are ready to learn the operational discipline. It is time to look at the precise, time-tested steps of the daily routine. The exact actions you must take at dawn and dusk to ensure your thermal battery discharges its heat into the night and shields your bedroom from the day. When you look at the heavy water jugs resting along your bedroom wall, or feel the dense weight of a thick quilt shielding your window from the midday sun, you are stepping into a long, quiet lineage of human survival. This practice did not begin with modern engineering manuals, nor did it originate on our Lancaster County farms. Stop and think about how our ancestors lived for thousands of years before the first electric grid was ever conceived. In the high sun-baked plateaus of the American Southwest, the Pueblo peoples built thick-walled adobe homes out of mud and straw. In the ancient, arid valleys of Persia, builders constructed massive wind catchers and deep subterranean structures out of heavy brick. These diverse cultures, separated by vast oceans and centuries of time, shared one critical piece of common knowledge. They knew how to use the earth beneath their feet to smooth out the harsh extremes of the sky. When the first German and Swiss settlers, the ancestors of today's Pennsylvania Dutch, arrived in the valleys of Pennsylvania in the early 1700s, they brought these deeply ingrained building traditions with them. They looked at the limestone deposits scattered across the rolling hills and recognized a profound gift. They spent years hauling those heavy stones by hand, laying up farmhouse walls that measured 2, sometimes 3 feet thick. My grandfather used to tell me that a proper stone house breathes with the seasons. It takes the biting cold of January and holds on to it just long enough to temper the arrival of June. And it takes the bright warmth of August and keeps it locked within the stone until the frost of October returns. The farm wives of that era did not have instruments to measure British thermal units or thermal diffusivity, but they possessed a sharp, intuitive understanding of the day's rhythm. They knew exactly when the outdoor air shifted from a threat to a relief, and their daily routine of sealing the house at dawn and opening it at dusk was as regular and dependable as the morning milking. For a long time, modern industrial society looked back at those old stone farmhouses as primitive relics of a harder, less comfortable past. When cheap electricity and mass-produced mechanical air conditioning arrived in the mid-20th century, America eagerly tore down its old building traditions. We began building thin-walled, lightweight houses wrapped in synthetic insulation, completely dependent on an umbilical cord of electrical wires to keep the interior stable. We traded the quiet, self-contained resilience of structural mass for a spinning mechanical compressor and a monthly utility bill. But if you look closely at the cutting edge of modern architecture today, you will find that the highest tier of building science is turning its eyes backward. In research bulletins published by the United States Department of Energy's passive solar design programs, Engineers note that integrating internal thermal mass into lightweight wood frame structures can reduce peak cooling loads by up to 30%. The Global Cement and Concrete Association frequently documents how the high specific heat capacity of dense materials functions as a natural thermal buffer, reducing the energy needed to stabilize indoor environments. Furthermore, a landmark study published in the international journal Buildings and Cities analyzed traditional passive cooling techniques and confirmed that night flush ventilation, the exact process of opening the house at sunset to purge the heat from dense mate, Riles, is one of the most effective ways to lower indoor temperatures without consuming a single watt of mechanical power. Science has finally found the vocabulary to explain what the old folks knew by heart. Traditional wisdom is not superstition. It is tested, verified truth that simply waited for our technology to catch up with its elegance. Now, the choice rests with you. There is an enormous, multi-billion-dollar industry dedicated to convincing you that comfort is a commodity you must purchase every month from the electric company. They want you to believe that without a complex machine humming outside your window, you are completely helpless against the heat of summer. Understand this. You do not have to accept that dependency. If you live in a climate where the night air brings a refreshing chill, you have a free, clean source of cooling waiting right outside your window every evening. The materials needed to harvest that cooling, a handful of heavy water containers, a few dense pieces of furniture, and thick, insulating blankets, are simple, accessible, and well within your reach today. They require no specialist to install, no maintenance contracts, and no fossil fuels to run. Tonight, when the sun begins to dip below the horizon, I invite you to step away from the buttons and the thermostats. Walk into your bedroom and look at it through the eyes of the old builders. Find a quiet, shaded corner along an interior wall and place your water containers there. Hang a heavy